It's a new year, and with T-Mobile, it's not about how far apart we are. It's about how close we can be. So we're bringing out our best deal. Right now, get the iPhone 12 on us on every single plan with eligible iPhone trade-in.
So I can FaceTime with my sister in Savannah.
That's right, the iPhone 12 on us on every plan. All on America's 5G leader in coverage. T-Mobile.
With 24 monthly bill credits and a new line plus tax. If you cancel credit, stop and balance on required finance agreement may be due. Contact us for well-qualified buyers. Qualifying consumer plan required. See coverage and offer details at T-Mobile.com.
It's a new year, and with T-Mobile, it's not about how far apart we are. It's about how close we can be. So we're bringing out our best deal. Right now, get the iPhone 12 on us on every single plan with eligible iPhone trade-in.
So I can FaceTime with my sister in Savannah.
That's right, the iPhone 12 on us on every plan. All on America's 5G leader in coverage. T-Mobile.
With 24 monthly bill credits and a new line plus tax. If you cancel credit, stop and balance on required finance agreement may be due. Contact us for well-qualified buyers. Qualifying consumer plan required. See coverage and offer details at T-Mobile.com.
Welcome to the Behind the Bits podcast. Your host, Scott Curtis, wants to learn everything he can about stand-up comedy and take you along for the ride. Scott and his guests talk serious about comedy in every episode. Behind the Bits will uncover knowledge from different perspectives on subjects such as writing and performing stand-up comedy, as well as booking shows and the comedy life. If you're thinking about becoming a stand-up comic, already in the comic game, or a comedy nerd, Behind the Bits is the show for you. Now, let's get Behind the Bits.
I am always looking for the good independent podcasts out there. I wouldn't normally be listening to a science fiction podcast, but by golly, I found one because this dude is on a group with me, and I went ahead and listened, and I didn't hate it. It was actually really good, and because the word funny is in it, the Funny Science Fiction podcast is something that I really like, and I've got Tim Bicycle here with me. Did I pronounce that right, Tim?
Close enough, but
Bicycle.
Yeah.
Bicycle. Okay.
Bicycle. Yeah.
Bicycle.
Like you're saying bye to a seagull.
Bicycle.
I've got Tim and I've got Frank, who just co-hosted an episode that I was on, and Frank is actually the host of a podcast called The Warp Shelf that I haven't checked out yet, but we'll talk about that a little bit. Tim, first of all, let's talk about Funny Science Fiction. What is this podcast all about?
Funny Science Fiction show. It's an interview-based show where we bring actors, writers, directors, content creators on, and we talk about what they like in science fiction, or if they're an actor or director, we talk about their roles, what they've been doing, all this kind of stuff. And we talk about what they like about sci-fi, what they don't like about sci-fi. We, depending on the person, we get into a little bit more of the deeper, nerdy theory stuff of sci-fi, but at the same time, we like to make jokes about it and have fun with it, because sci-fi doesn't have to be stuffy. And actually, Bob, in that particular episode, it's all sci-fi should be fun.
Why did you start the podcast?
The force is that I already had another podcast. This is my second podcast. I have another podcast called Focused on Forward, where one of my other co-hosts, his name is Josh, I interviewed him on that podcast. And because his daughter, when she was born very prematurely, was like a pound, 15 ounces, something like that. Tiny little thing. And so she had some health complications, couple months in the NICU, all that stuff. And that was recommended to me by his dad, who I was part of his Funny Science Fiction group on Facebook. And I was helping him out. I was an admin on his page, still am an admin on his page. He's a science fiction author and writes some really cool sci-fi books. His name is Drayton Allen. And he said, we've got this group, and we get access to all these sci-fi people because of the group. We should do a podcast and have some fun with it. And I'm like, I got the microphone. Why not? And that's basically how it started. We started just figuring out a way to go about it, how we wanted to do it. Here we are. We've had some really cool guests on so far, and we've got some really cool guests coming up. Yeah. And I'm really happy to be part of it.
If you're into fandoms, I always say Funny Science Fiction podcast is a great listen because it doesn't hold itself to
Yeah.
one fandom. Of course, it's very, very sci-fi heavy, but they've also talked about video games and talked about Overwatch and many other, and cosplay and many other mediums of nerddom.
Through that, you may discover something you didn't know, and you may get into a whole new universe, which is... That's always fun. It's always fun to find something new that you love. And I just like your approach. You don't come at it super serious. You have some fun with. I like the quiz at the end, especially since I got 4 out of 5. It was really nice and an easy podcast. And it's an independent podcast, and I'm always waving the flag for independent podcasts because what Mark Maron and Conan O'Brien and Dax Shepard, they got enough people listening to them. You don't need to listen. Let's listen to the people that actually put the work in and are passionate about what they do and just didn't put up a podcast for the heck of it.
Because they were bored in 2020.
Yeah. And we all know, as people who do podcasts, we know the work that goes behind it because we're doing most of it ourselves, and we don't have a producer. We don't have people that are doing all the editing for us. We're doing it as a team, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah, absolutely.
You absolutely have to become a Renaissance man almost immediately. You got to be like, oh yes, I got to figure out audio editing real quick.
Yeah. And
fortunately, I have a nick for that, so
that's helpful. That's helpful.
Yeah. Well, on this podcast, on Focused on Forward, I am the one, the only. I do everything over there.
There you go.
But over here, I couldn't do anything that I do over here without Nick. So he's my right hand.
And I have to say, after doing a podcast for a while, that making new friends is also a cool thing. And so Tim, you and Frank was a guest on the podcast, and he just co-hosted today. So you guys have obviously struck up a friendship and have some similar ideas. There's nothing better than that. So
it's pretty cool.
That's the one good thing about the internet is that you can find kindred spirits and actually make a friendship with somebody that isn't necessarily in your area code.
Yeah, absolutely.
All you have to do is say something about not liking The Last Jedi or liking The Last Jedi, and you got a friend or a deathly enemy. There you go.
Exactly. Speaking of The Last Jedi, it's because of Frank that I've actually gone back and rewatched The Last Jedi, and I don't hate it as much anymore.
See? I got some insights. I got some things. I got some good advice.
I can do the stuff. I got the things.
One of the things I wanted to ask about is I haven't checked out Frank's podcast, The Warp Shelf. Can you tell me what that's all about?
Yeah. So the Warp Shelf, we cover anything that can go on a shelf. It's me and my buddy, Deshaun Vasquez. We did a podcast in college, and now we're doing one years later. And it's more of a review podcast. Like, we will choose a topic and try to review it like we did Wonder Woman and Soul with their releases. But we also do stuff like Filthy Casual, which is exactly like every other podcast that you listen to, where we just talk about what's going on and what we're watching and stuff like that. It's about two things: talking about things we love and encouraging people to see these great things, because there's so much negativity and so much, for lack of a better word, shitting on things all over the internet. Like, people will constantly just that's hate drives clicks. And I get that. I understand that's what drives clicks, but it's tiring. Yeah. So it's nice to listen to a podcast or tell people through your podcast about nice things, about things that are great, and that actually you would walk away from being like, that was a good time, instead of being like, oh man, I'm glad I saw that so I could tell everyone I hated it.
Yeah. And one of the great things about a long form podcast is I'm an older gentleman, and you think back to the old Dick Cavett show. That was an interview where he would talk for an hour or an hour and a half to one person. And you really learned a lot. So I get all these pop culture references as a 56-year-old on TV and stuff like that, and they fly by so quick, I don't get it. And when you listen to a show like yours, Tim, the Funny Science Fiction podcast, and I'm sure yours, Frank, the Warp Shelf podcast, you find out what the pop culture is all about. You find out why people like it. You find out why it's a thing, because I'm at a point in my life where on Saturday Night Live, I don't know anybody there anymore. And when they have a musical guest, I've never heard of them. The stuff that you guys are doing, it's really good. And that's why people my age need to listen to these long form podcasts, because first of all, we're used to longer interviews So when you listen to that kind of stuff, you actually get engrossed. I really appreciate that, and the fact that you guys reach out to different people. Let's just put this out there, Tim. Who's been the guest that really, I won't say favorite, who's been a guest that really surprised you on funny science fiction?
There's two. And one of them is co-hosting with me today.
Hey.
So honestly, I'm not saying this just because he's here. You can ask Nick, you can ask Drayton, any other guys. Frank's interview was one of my favorites, absolute favorites that we did, because we had so much fun. And it was just talking about stuff. When we talked about what I didn't like about Star Wars Last Jedi, one of the things I appreciated is that Frank didn't turn around and instantly become this jerk that was like, oh my God, I can't believe you don't like that movie, because he really liked it.
Yeah.
But he explained to me why he liked that movie, and maybe here's a viewpoint that maybe you can go back and watch that movie from. And he was dead nuts on. When I watched it from that, I went, oh yeah, I see it now. Okay. One of my other favorites was also one of our recent ones. Her name is Shannon Perry. Shannon Perry runs a podcast called the Oz 9 podcast. It's a sci-fi episodical podcast. It's
okay.
So it's like Star Trek, but with goofy characters and floating through space. Yeah, I told Shannon in her interview with us that we were moments away from becoming BFFs, because she was just so cool.
Yeah.
Just a couple moments into our interview, she's quoting Monty Python to me, and I'm like, I love you. You're amazing. Yeah. So she was a great guest. And Frank too. I like the people who can be quick on their feet. You can ask them a question. We've had some really cool people that way who are able to have a side question thrown at them, because most of my questions, I have it all scripted out. Here's what I want to say, how I want to say it. So that way it's not me forgetting that, oh yeah, this guy was working on this or that. But I still go off my back end here a little bit and asking questions. And there's a lot of times, and especially if you go back and you watch Frank's interview, there's a couple of times where I'm like, what about this? Because something will pop in my head. And I like it when people can take that and just, they can pivot and go to it, ask, and it's a nice asked and answered type of thing. And they can move along without them going, I didn't know we were going to talk about this. Oh.
Yeah, and it's so easy, because for me, if you woke me up at 4 a.m. and we're like, I have a Star Wars opinion, I'd be like, okay, what is it? And then and have a whole conversation with you at one, like in the middle of the night about Star Wars things. So I extremely appreciate like the quick on your feet, always thinking about sci-fi, and I really did enjoy being on Funny Science Fiction podcast, because it just kept going. It kept being like, yeah, but what else? But deeper,
what about this?
You know?
Yeah. Funny Science Fiction takes a different view of science fiction without getting mucked up in all the details. And the Warp Shelf, I'm sure, brings a lot of different experiences and a lot of different viewpoints on stuff. Totally appreciate people who put in that effort, and I'm glad I met you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And two, just before, I don't know if you're getting ready to conclude up here, but just in case, I want to make sure this gets said. If you like deep dives into stuff, the Warp Shelf is the perfect deep dive podcast. They've done some really cool episodes over there, and if you like deep dives into sci-fi and sci-fi theory and just basic cool geek nerddom stuff, check out that. Check out his website too, thegalaxyofgeek.com. I lost hours of my life on that website.
That's great. Yeah. I got to say, I appreciate what you guys are doing, and I'm going to check out the Warp Shelf for sure.
Yeah.
Before we get done here, Tim, how can we find Funny Science Fiction?
So my preferred way is I ask that you go check us out on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a Funny Science Fiction podcast, is a video podcast. We do put it out in audio format on every podcast destination, including iHeart and Amazon and Pandora, all the ones you got to sell a piece of your soul to get onto. But we prefer, if you would, go to check us out and subscribe to us on YouTube. Check out our videos there.
Okay, great.
I'm the chubby guy in the glasses and the backwards baseball cap. Can't miss me.
Frank, how about the Warp Shelf?
Yeah, you can check out galaxygeek.com, like Tim was saying, where we have all these articles from a bunch of different writers that we all work together on. But that's also where my podcast lives. The Warp Shelf can be found on every podcast platform and YouTube. We do a video version, and basically, yeah, Galaxy of Geeks where it's all lives, or search it the way you like.
Yep. Great. It's been really nice meeting you guys. It's been great talking to you, Tim,
Thanks.
Frank. Make sure, folks, make sure you check out the Funny Science Fiction podcast and the Warp Shelf because they're good. Okay? Thanks. Bye. I've got a gentleman who shared the spotlight as an opener for Joel McHale, Nikki Glazer, Bert Kreischer, Joey Diaz, Russell Peters, and Dave Chappelle. Holy cow. He is a frequent guest on the nationally syndicated Bob and Tom show. I can't wait to talk about that. His debut album, Dumber Than a Fish, is available on iTunes, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, and all the different places. Several tracks from that album can be heard on Raw Dog Comedy, Laugh USA, and Comedy Roundup on Sirius XM, which is very cool. Without further ado, let's bring up my guest, Gabe Kea. Hey, Gabe.
Hello.
How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really neat to pay attention to Facebook and have people's albums come out and actually listen to them and find some great people that I didn't know about. So I found yours. I've listened to your album through a few times and really loved it. So Dumber Than a Fish is available everywhere. Make sure that if you listen on Spotify that you actually buy it too, because that's the difference of Gabe making 10 cents a year and a portion of $10. That's I always try to make sure that I tell people to do that because it's just people think Spotify is paying you and they're really not. So
Yeah, I hear you on that. I'm all for whatever. I just want you to hear the album, obviously, but obviously purchasing it helps me more.
Yeah, no doubt. When did you first start doing stand-up?
I started doing stand-up around 2003. So a long time ago. And that was probably just started doing open mics at that time. Probably started actually getting booked and working 4 or 5 years later. Maybe 2009 started working on the road a little bit more and working as a stand-up comedian. But yeah, I've been doing stand-up a long time.
Yeah.
Started in St. Louis, Missouri, and moved to Cincinnati probably in that 2009, 2010 time period. Been here about 10 years.
Cool. So what was that first open mic?
It was all my friends. I knew everybody in the audience. I'd honestly come and watch a bunch of shows, a bunch of open mics. And I realized when someone was brand new and they brought everybody or everybody came to see them, they were like really taken aback by that. Because it's nerve wracking to get up on stage at all, let alone when you realize, oh my gosh, everybody here knows me. And, so I was nervous about that, but I did well. I think I did well, obviously, because I knew a lot of my friends in the crowd and stuff. Your first few times are often like that, and then you hit that third or fourth time where you're in a bar somewhere and you're like, no, oh boy, this is what stand-up's really
about. It's funny because you get, I think you're probably my 55th interview, and it's a mixture of how those open mics start. Some people actually go into it intentionally. They've watched a few, they do their homework and know that a joke should be this long or there should actually be a punchline and not just meandering around. And some people just go up because a friend pushed them up. Other people wait for years before they actually go up, but they've always wanted to. So it's a good mixture, and I know that it's good to have all your friends there on that first one, but it is also nerve-wracking in another way rather than not having anybody out there that doesn't know you, because your friends, if you eat dirt, then they're going to let you know it for the rest of your life.
Yes. Yeah. And that can be a tough one the first time, because obviously you have no clue about what works, what doesn't work when you get up there. And when I told you the time period, it was a lot different scene too. I just said like my third open mic was at a bar. I don't think my third open mic was at a bar. I think back in that time period, late early 2000s, the only open mic was at the club and it was once a week. So it was like Tuesday and you'd go and you'd hope to get on the list. And there's only like 15 to 20 people to get on the list. Some nights you make it, some nights you wouldn't. So you perform sometimes twice a month, or it's kind of what's going on now. Fewer and far between on the open mics. So
right, no doubt.
A lot of different, very different time.
Have you done any of the virtual stuff?
I have. Yeah, I've done some Zoom shows, and at first I was doing quite a bit of them, and then and I've still done some. If I get asked to do something, I'm all for it. But been doing a lot of podcasts. Podcasts are big right now. Podcasts are the new open mics.
They sure are.
Of stuff I got to try out too. So I got my stuff ready if you want some jokes.
Oh, great. That might be cool. We could maybe workshop a couple of them.
Yeah, let's do it.
So who were your influences?
Influences starting out, I had obvious comedians and comedic actors and stuff like that I like typical like Jim Carrey and a lot of Canadian guys. I really like Norm Macdonald when I was I like Conan a lot. I watched a lot of Conan, and I liked how he was loose and riffy and would go off on tangents and just be silly, and I really like that. But once I started doing stand-up comedy and that going to the open mics and stuff, I would more just watch people at the shows. And starting out in St. Louis, Missouri, I watched a lot of Greg Warren and Dan Chopin and Brett Clausen, Mike McRae, some of these guys that and Andy Smith, people that had been doing it longer than me, men and women that all had a unique style of what they did. And I really did enjoy, and I still enjoy watching live stand-up comedy much more than like a special or something on TV or something like that. So once my influences changed to like basically who was in my proximity and who was performing a lot. And then those are the people that talked to me too and told me how to do stand-up comedy, how they did it, how they learned to do it, different aspects of that. So all those people that I named there were around in the St. Louis area when I was starting out. And they were also more established comedians. There's people that were coming up at the same time as me, or like people that went on to have excellent careers that I learned a lot from. Tommy Johnigan, Nikki Glazer, those people are from St. Louis area as well. Andy Woodhull. Yeah.
Tommy Johnigan's, he's great. He's one of my big ones. I like him a lot.
Yeah, he's one of my all-time favorites. I remember the first time I saw him on stage, I was like, whoa, who's this kid?
He's different.
Yeah.
He's got a style. So this changes the pace a little bit. This is something I like to know because I'm a voracious reader and listener of podcasts and music and stuff like that. Have you listened lately to any books, podcasts, music, read an article, anything? Have you had anything that just turned on a light bulb for you and gave you some new stuff to think about, new stuff that maybe may change your act a little bit or anything like that?
I read Sam Tallent's book. I haven't totally finished it, so I'm in the middle of reading Sam Tallent's book. I really like that. That's if you've ever worked the road or done some road gigs, that's a very accurate depiction of working stand-up comedy on the road.
Yeah.
I was given by a neighbor, I was given the book that it's like the story of me, and it's by the person that wrote the Comedy Bible, the same person that did that.
Okay.
And I usually when I started, I didn't read a lot of stand-up comedy books and and even getting that from a neighbor was like, thanks a lot, buddy. Yeah. Thanks for the book on how to become a stand-up comedian. I'm like, I already am. I don't need a book.
Yeah.
But I was like, let me check this out. And I read a little bit about it, and I really liked what the person was saying. And I found parts that I already do, and it's not like my perceived notion of him giving me the book. I'm like, oh yeah, I do a lot of this stuff. This is how I write, and this is what I write about. And I like writing autobiographical as much as possible. And so that's a really good book that a neighbor gave me that kind of offended me. And I really like the podcast Middle of Somewhere with Cy Amundsen and Chad Daniels.
Oh, okay. I haven't heard of that one.
Oh, it's really good. And I've been listening to that just like I was driving recently, and I would just listen to 4 episodes in a row. And both those guys, they're from Minnesota. One lives in Minneapolis, one lives up north in Fergus Falls, and they have a really great podcast. Very funny. Both very hilarious guys, but also like fast pace. And you'll listen to 3 episodes and be like, what? Oh, that was 3 hours? How'd that happen?
Wow.
Yeah, really like that podcast.
I really wish I had more time in the day to listen to all the podcasts I want to, because you just gave me that one, and I've got 15 on my list that I still want to listen to. So it's hard, and I'm not driving as much as I was, so don't get to plug that in as much.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? And my wife, when we're listening to podcasts, when we're driving together, she just likes serial murder stuff. You know? Yeah. And those are okay. It's a change of pace.
You're like, some of these people kill.
Yeah.
They're really good killers.
Yeah, for sure. Last question for the rapid round. What comedy album or special would you consider to be your all-time favorite? And you can go top 3 if you want.
Ooh, comedy album or special to be my all-time favorite. How many people say their own is number one? Probably a lot. No. You know what? I don't have a lot of favorites, but there's an album that Jimmy Pardo recorded at Go Bananas Comedy Club where he's riffing the whole time. I really like that one. I can't even think of the name of it, but that's super funny. Mm-hmm. And then I could say, yeah, any of Tommy Johnigan's stand-up 1, 2, or 3. Those are all excellent. And anything Andy Woodhull has out, I always like he's one of my favorite comics as well. Mm. So there you go.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, as far as I want to do this live just because I know how hard it is for comedians to do anything right now. And you recorded this album, Dumber Than a Fish, last year, but you put it out this year. What's it like putting an album out during a pandemic? Was it all the working parts you have to do pretty much remotely? How was it just business-wise putting it out?
That is a difficult part. I was very fortunate to have recorded at a club in January. So
okay,
a few months before the clubs had shut down. And I have friends that like had their album artwork made. They had the week set out. And then it was like in March or April that they were supposed to record their album. I can't imagine if that was the scenario with me, I would be hard to deal with. But there's so many aspects of doing an album and putting an album together, all from, first off, is booking the right situation. Like sometimes some people like to do a one night, tell everybody I'm recording an album, it's this Wednesday night at this comedy club, and pack the room out and have one shot, and then that's it. That's the album. You can edit it together, but there's no. And then the other aspect would be like the week of comedy where you like record every night. And then what I did is I did that, and I searched for the base good show that was like, this is the one I want to work with. And then I can cut some pieces out, put some pieces in from the other shows, which isn't as easy as it would sound, but that's what I also had to do remotely. At first I was meeting with this, a local comic, Clinton Jacob, he does an excellent job of sound engineer and editing. And he was putting together the stuff. We met probably 4 or 5 times, had 3 or 4 hour sessions of just listening to me over and over again. Very, very painful for both of us.
Yeah.
I really don't like listening to myself, especially with someone there.
Yeah.
That you're like, that's great. You get to hear that too.
I'm very much the same. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody can hear all of it. I think we went through the Sunday show and I was just like, hey, can we just stop? Let's just stop. We don't need to listen to the second half of this. You could just tell that the laughter was like so much different than all the other. So it was like, this would totally stick out if we added it onto the album.
Yeah.
So that's a difficult part. That does take some time, and it does take some coordination, communication. All that's important to have if you're doing it through a record label or if you're self-producing or however you're doing it. You want to have everybody on the same page. You want to pay everybody well ahead of time, not pay them like, once the album comes out, I'll pay you. I was like trying to make sure everybody's taken care of as they're doing it. Artwork, they're not waiting on any money from the guy that should be paying. I'll pay him, and then when he pays you, you can get me back or whatever.
Yeah.
And I had a local comedian, Chris Weir. He did the artwork for the cover there. That he basically came up with the concept just from me telling him this is what the title is going to be. And the title is the tag of my opening joke.
Right.
The last line of my first joke is what the album is named after. and Clinton helped me come up with that name too. I had a few different ideas of what to do, and but I like it. It's unique. It draws you in too. Dumber than a fish. What's that mean?
Yeah.
So I like that aspect of it. Also, funny, and I'm talking about how comedy's done as a community. The line "dumber than a fish." It used to be, I think, I would talk about like the state over the state and how they all think they're stupid, and you get down to Mississippi and they're like, "Fish, they're stupid," and I think I had something like the Gulf of Mexico. That's the dumbest state. Before that, I had a different line that I was doing in the joke, and one of the comedians I looked up to starting out, Robert Hawkins, told me why don't you just say fish? And he's just fish. Just say the word, and it worked beautifully. And it was like, oh, you changed my whole joke, Robert. Thank you. And then I didn't even think about that until the album's made, it's out, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, even the title is given to me. Am I just like a total hack? It's like, take anything you got, people. Come on.
Yeah, you can take all the help you can get. But yeah, that opener is just fantastic, and I think Dumber Than a Fish really fits the tone of the album anyway, so it's really good.
Thanks. Good. Yeah, that opener is also obviously changes depending on where you are and if I'm in Indiana, Kentucky's still relatable there. But sometimes if you're in Oklahoma, you'll be like, how do you feel about Texas? And they're like, yeah, we know that, it seems to work pretty much anywhere. And it's just it's an observation of observational comedy.
Right.
That's usually what people go in and they make fun of Kentucky. That's what they do when they go to Ohio.
Yeah, no doubt. I really enjoyed your album, and I'm not just saying that because you're on the podcast. I really enjoyed the fact, okay, there's a lot of angry comics out there now, and there's a lot of low energy comics out there now, and which I like both of them. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but you come like right in the middle as far as energy. It feels like a conversation, like you're in a room with your friends and you're just talking about stuff. And that's one of the things I really enjoyed about it, because sometimes you don't want somebody yelling at you, and sometimes you don't want to be with somebody who thinks they're smarter than everybody in the room and shows it in their punchlines and their comedy and stuff like that. So I felt this is just somebody who's in the room. I'm very comfortable listening to him. You're not screaming at me. You're not trying to challenge me and say I'm stupid or anything like that. So that's what I really enjoyed about it.
That's good. That's a very nice way to put where I'm at.
Yeah.
Because you're right. I do have like a high energy, but it's not a angry or forced energy. And it's like my on my toes when I'm on stage. I like to bounce around a little bit.
Yeah.
Like that sort of energy. So I'm definitely not low energy, but I also am. I think it's indicative of where I work too. I work a lot of different type of venues. So I do like a college that's all 20-year-olds that don't know what nepotism means because they've never experienced it. And I can do like an older VFW hall that's all 65-year-old Q-tips. And, and those people could be easily offended if my humor is all just about pop culture or youth or whatever's going on now. It's a mix of all that stuff. So then I also don't have to, and that's what I built in my act basically it's my 30 to 45 minutes that I can take around and do anywhere. And then I add other stuff in there and slip. Obviously the album's got a lot. There's a portion of the album that's a lot of the newer stuff that I've been working on the last 6 to 8 months. And then the other portion are jokes that I've been doing because it's my first album. It's like, that's 10 years old. That joke has been.
Yeah.
A joke can almost drive.
You need the anchors to make that flow. Yeah, I can understand that. So let's think about where you are now and the style that you're doing now. Is that something that evolved, or were you a totally different type of comic when you started?
I would say I was a totally different type of comic. I think when you asked me my influences in the rapid part, I was thinking first thing that came to mind was Dane Cook, and but I did Dane Cook at the time. I probably got a lot of, you remind me of Dane Cooks, but that hasn't happened in 10 years. Not because I still sound just like Dane Cook, but no one listens to Dane Cook. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that was, and it also might be like a physical, like a similar looking guy. Maybe I didn't have a beard back then also too.
Better sleep means a better you. That's why Mattress Firm came up with the Rest Assured Promise, featuring the best mattresses from America's best mattress brands. Like the Temper Breeze collection, available now, with a $300 instant gift good towards your choice of sleep accessories. Visit with our sleep experts in-store, online, or by phone to find the right bed for you. Only at Mattress Firm, America's #1 Tempur-Pedic retailer. Offer valid with qualifying purchase. Restrictions apply. Valid at participating locations only. For offer details, visit mattressfirm.com/sale.
It's a new year, and with T-Mobile, it's not about how far apart we are. It's about how close we can be. So we're bringing out our best deal. Right now, get the iPhone 12 on us on every single plan with eligible iPhone trade-in.
So I can FaceTime with my sister in Savannah.
That's right, the iPhone 12 on us on every plan. All on America's 5G leader in coverage. T-Mobile.
With 24 monthly bill credits and a new line plus tax. If you cancel, credit stop and balance on required finance agreement may be due. Contact us for well-qualified buyers. Qualifying consumer plan required. See coverage and offer details at T-Mobile.com.
Maybe that's why I grew a beard. I'm like,
Yeah.
They doesn't have this, right?
He might now. You never know.
Yeah, he probably does. He probably beard and flannel.
Yeah.
Beard and flannel.
As far as a progression of where you were more, I guess if you're being compared to Dane Cook, you were a little bit more wacky, a little bit more outlandish and all that kind of stuff. Where did you finally say, okay, I'm going to be this guy, and you became the guy that I just heard listening to your album?
I wouldn't say there was any point where that I like how you just described became that person. I think it's just like I was saying, over time and from the places that I've worked, that it makes you that type of comedian. But I think there is a path. If you read my Facebook or my Twitter, you'd be like, this guy talks about politics all the time, because it's like very, and especially in the last 4 years, things have gotten more political. And it's funny when you look at your memories and you're like, I'm like, oh gosh, was I really just like, I get a memory from, what was it, right after Trump got elected, and it was just like every day was politics, and I'm like, man, I got to get away from that. But it's so easy because it's just what the news cycle gives you. If that's what you're getting, then that's what you're going to talk about, and that's what you're going to get. You're going to get feedback or reactions from, maybe. But so I like to have my political viewpoint in my comedy somewhat. But like you said, I'm not trying to bash it over your head. I'm not trying to make you feel like I've got the answer and you don't. I just try and do it in a very coming from your perspective, this is my perspective sort of way.
Right.
And that might come from me growing up in a very conservative Republican household, being that type of political. When in the early 2000s, I was very Republican. I worked on Republican campaigns. I was like very politically driven in that sense. And then I just had a shift and a change. And it was around the time they started doing stand-up. I don't think it had anything to do with stand-up per se. It was more just where I was in my life. And I was probably at that point when I was still hanging out with a lot of people from high school, a smaller group that were people just like me demographically. And then as I not just started doing stand-up, but also had some different jobs in the real world, you're interacting with a lot more diverse people from diverse backgrounds, and you get a chance to see yourself in a different light, just like as you would if you travel to Asia, Europe, anywhere else. And my parents are both Canadian. I grew up here in the States. I went to school here, but I had a lot of Canadian influence too by going back and forth my whole life. And I still have, my sister lives up in Canada, and then I have two sisters that live in the U.S. So those are my COVID sisters. And then my sister in Canada, she's the one that didn't get COVID. So it's pretty simple on how to break it down.
One of the things that you said there really got me, because it's funny, because I'm like you, it took me longer. I was a pretty conservative Republican dude for a long time too, and I watch my kids, and they're both grown now, and they expanded their cultural horizons as they were growing up. And my son actually was pretty conservative too before he got out of the house. And they're both, one of them's up by DC, and the other one's down in Alabama, but in Huntsville. And it's funny how they've changed, and I've changed by watching how they change. And
I totally feel that.
Yeah, and it's cool to be open to that, because there are people who could be bombarded with different viewpoints and different cultures and stuff like that, and they still have that wall up, and they're going to be who they are no matter what. They're never going to change. And it's great to hear about somebody who kind of changed, evolved, and actually listen to stuff, because there is a point where some people just don't do it anymore, and it's good that you did.
Yeah, and I really didn't think about that too much until recently, when I was just explaining to somebody that, like, how I used to, and they were like, "Oh, you got a really good perspective. Then you've seen both sides." Mm-hmm. And I am both sides. There's way more than two sides to anything, especially politics.
Right.
But I think I worked on a lot of so I shifted more. I would classify myself as more of a liberal. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not really affiliated with a political party until there is. In Ohio, the only time you have to be affiliated is when you ask for a ballot on a primary. So that's the only time you're a Republican or a Democrat, and you have to ask for that specific ballot. Otherwise, I think that it's obviously, like, people want to put you in just if you're a comedian, you're doing crowd work, you want to put a person in a box. Where are you coming from? One way or the other. It's easier to deal with that. And I think of it as there's a lot more. And what I was trying to say too is I worked on a bunch of Democratic candidates' political campaigns after I did the other side, and then after that I was like telling people that are like, hey, we're getting names for this year's Democratic voter turnout thing, and I'd be like, yeah, lose my number. I don't want any part of it. You know, I'm mad at them now. I'm like, you really ruined it this last year. But I think that's American politics, is no one can get it. And the easiest thing, or the hackiest thing as a comedian, is I hate both sides. But I don't want to hear that either.
Yeah. On the other hand, most reasonable people would just like somebody who is fit for the job to be in there, and it doesn't even matter what political party. So just don't let the country fall apart, please. That's all we need right now.
Yeah, people are like 2020, whoa, and I'm like, let's not forget how we got here.
Yeah,
right? This wasn't some weird accident.
Yeah. Now, you talked about in the album about growing up in like you said, a very conservative Christian household. How did that affect you getting into the comedy world? Because, I know people can be a little bit shielded from the world when they're in a very conservative household like that, and the comedy world's totally different in that you can see a lot of different types of people at an open mic. And how was there a shock factor for you when you did that?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And I went to a private Christian high school too, so I was sheltered in general in that way. But the best way I could say is I never wanted my mom to come to an open mic, because it just would be like, that's what if when I was in high school, she'd be like, you're not allowed to hang around these kids.
Yeah.
Like, she would just hear what they have to say and be like, oh, you can't go to these things anymore. This is bad. And so I always shielded her. I was like, no, you can't come to watch me or any of it. And then I think I waited till 10 years in, and I finally got like opportunity to headline a show and just like I thought, there are a few people on the show, and that's all my mom talked about after. I can't believe that woman said that thing. And I was like, oh, Mom, I knew you would be like this.
Yeah.
She's very, and I think that in another aspect that has helped me is I'm usually just cleaner in general. Like my comedy is pretty clean. And honestly, when I was working with Clinton, the guy that helped me edit the album, he was always encouraging me to put more. He's leave that in. That's good. That makes it good. Because you can tell it's me out of my element and being a little looser when I am dirty. Because I'm definitely not like dirty comedian or by any means, but I can use whatever, use a good F-bomb to get them back on my side if I need to, or something like that. But I was trying, my mindset was, I don't want this. I want to take the dirtiness out so I can get it on serious. And that's what I was concerned about. I'm like, I want to sell out over here, buddy.
Yeah.
You want me to be like, good. No, it's more true as an artist or whatever. I want money. Like, that's what.
It's so much better to be on 3 channels on Sirius than just one.
Yes.
Because so many are just on Raw Dog, or they're on the clean one, whatever the clean one is. So it's funny. It's better because obviously it's more exposure, more plays and all that. Yeah, that's definitely a plus in your type of comedy. And I didn't count how many times you swore or you went into explicit subject matter, but it was probably maybe 3 minutes of the whole thing. Even if that.
Yeah, and there's the one that my daughter's sparkle. Her mom had a sparkle on her face. That's a joke that I can't do if I can't, like, if they're like, oh, you can't say no F-bombs. Yeah. I'm like, oh, that joke's not going to work. There's no clean version of that joke. So.
But yeah, everything's well placed, and it's not like a whole. It's just not a whole barrage of fuck yous all over the place, and it's refreshing. But also, because I'm clean, pretty much. I'm a lot like you, pretty clean. And as a new comic, it's hard to be like that without thinking that you're the odd guy out, because you have 3 comics go on before you that have dick jokes and all that, and that's all they do, or real serious drug humor or something like that. And then you come up and you think that the audience isn't going to respond. And sometimes it's harder like that. But one of the things I've found, and I tell comics that want to be clean, is that it doesn't matter what you say, you just got to be funny. The audience has no expectations until you start talking. And that's hard for some comics, because some comics actually that were giving me notes and giving me advice said, you got to say fuck more. And I'm like, no. Cuss like a sailor in real life, but that I don't have the look, and I don't have the demeanor of somebody who cusses and did a lot of drugs when he was young.
So it's totally out of place. They're like, be more like me.
Yeah.
I think someone said that about any comic that gives you advice is any comic is just telling you how they do comedy. So it's good to know that, and it's good to also remember that it's good to be true to yourself, or to do what from growing up. I think that's one of the things I'm really thankful of, the way I was brought up, and now how my comedy's turned out. Is I'm glad that I have that cleanness, or perceived cleanness, at least slight cleanness. That's the funny part, is like when I did see my album come up and it showed all the explicit tracks, and I was like, that many? But it's all usually just like a line in each.
Right.
Yeah, it's one thing maybe, but it's got to be. I see what I'm scared of is my daughter growing up, if she's like totally desensitized, because I'm just like, tell her whatever, and then I'm like, how's this gonna end up? She's gonna be like, yeah, you gotta say fuck more in your comedy.
Yeah.
Like,
you know, you want to say it, just say it. Yeah, I think it's probably an advantage to be brought up in a very conservative household, because a lot of comics who weren't don't understand how to talk to somebody who's conservative or gear their comedy towards it. And they get this idea in their head that a conservative Christian is this cookie cutter person who's got a pretty low IQ and never reads a book and all this kind of stuff. And that's just not true. They're smart and they can handle some edgy stuff. There's just certain lines that they don't want to hear. And that's got to be an advantage for you.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to like when I was watching comedy when I was a kid, and when my mom would change the channel, she'd be like, that's enough of that. And I'm like, okay, so that's the line right there. That's where she loses her crap.
Yeah. One of the things that I really liked about your album, and this is another thing where comedy advice comes in, that you are able to mix the personal stuff along with observational stuff, and it just flows in between that. And the funny thing is, most comics that give you advice will say either be a personal comic or be an observational comic, pick one. And you're able to navigate that without looking there's a hard stop to your joke and then a new joke coming up. That's good. Are you aware of that and try to make it so that your personality and your personal experiences are like congruent with the observational stuff that you do?
I think that would probably be something that would be more subconscious, or when I'm preparing my sets, the way I group things together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for, when I write my set lists out, I usually group 2 or 3 jokes together and then 2 or 3 jokes like that. And they can flip, and I might have little notes later, like, oh, I did this a lot later. And I like to put stuff together that just flows nicely to the next joke, so you don't have a lot of pauses or long pauses or anything like that. So I think that naturally, or just automatically in my brain, just like gets broken down like that back and forth. But I think it also comes back to what we were talking about before, and just having, like, trying not to be just one specific type of thing. Like you said, like you some of it's personal and some of it's observational. You can be both, and you can be both in the same joke probably even, but I'd probably put the observational or the, what I would say, topical, like something about, I think I did something about Chick-fil-A, and then I did something about turtles and paper straws and plastic straws. In my brain, I'm just grouping that as going out to eat. Like, these are things that you hear when you go out to eat, or and I think a lot of comics, like Jim Gaffigan, he'll go from one subject to the, and it's all like food, and you're like, was he just at the food court and like, all right, that place, and then writes a joke about that, looks at the next one, there, we got one for that. You know?
I did a workshop with a guy I respect, but I'm not going to say who it was, because I think he gave me bad advice, because I do the same thing. I go from observational to personal stuff, and it's amazing how similar my act is to yours without being anything like it, because I'm me. But he told me that I need to pick a lane, and I was like, I don't know about that, because it's all funny. I've made people laugh with it. No, I decided not to take that advice.
I think the benefit of the personal is that there's less chance of you having parallel thinking with someone else. Which honestly, that someone, I talked to a comic that I was working with, and he was like, oh, this other guy's got a great joke just like that about turtles and mass shootings. And I was like, what? No. I'm like, I came up with that. And then I'm like thinking, you know what? That has nothing to do with my family. It has nothing to do with me personally. Anybody could have thought of that anywhere.
Yeah.
I obviously want to be original and don't want to have a lot of stuff that other people have. And especially when you get to those audition situations where, it's 5 minutes, get it ready for this festival, or something that could lead to a TV or something, you want to have something that is more yourself, I think. More that way it's just not, even though I think that joke that I was just, the turtle joke, that was really good right now. This is really topical. And I sent that to a festival, and I was like, there's no way I'm not getting it. And then I didn't get in with it. And I was like, and then I worked with someone, and they told me that, like, several other people, and I was like, that could have been it too. Maybe I was just throw them in the pile of the turtle jokes. They're all doing jokes about turtles or something.
Yeah. I have never heard anything like that one, but there's a lot of comedy out there.
Yeah. No, thank you. I never heard anything. But I think I was working with Byron Bowers at the Funny Bone, and very good comic. He's in the movie Honey Boy with Shia LaBeouf, and he said he was telling us about masks too. This was in like February before the lockdown, and he got this mask, and he was like, I was just in Japan. This is what everybody wears in Japan. Everybody wears this outside.
Yeah.
He was making jokes about how if he wore this around town here, he'd be like, I'd get shot for wearing this. You can't wear a mask. But very insightful very good comic. And then he told me, he was like, oh, Orny Adams, he's got that turtle mass shooting. I was like, no, that guy's bigger than me. He's got more. He's going to get more play on that. But it's honestly, there's another thing with that too. If you hear somebody doing a similar joke to yours, I think that the over the state joke, I heard Bill Burr do a similar joke about New York and New Jersey and how they hate each other. There's this big rivalry, but the same people. It's the exact same stuff.
Yeah.
I was listening and I was like, oh man, that is exactly like what I was talking about. But then I'm thinking, well, I like Bill Burr and I like his take on it. And obviously mine is unique to myself, where I've got the Canadian line at the end because I'm Canadian. So it's an observation that anybody could make, but I try to make it unique to myself at the same time.
Yeah. And that's another one. You can't take that out. That's one of your best bits, hands down.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
So as far as...
and then you see it and you're like, does that mean I'm done doing this? Bit? You're like, but I think as a comedian, we worry about that stuff. Obviously, we don't want to be seen as someone that's doing a bunch of stuff that other people are doing, or perceived as someone that heard someone do that joke and then wrote their own take on it. Like, you never know how you're being judged or perceived by the audience or your peers or other people in the comedy scene and stuff. So those things all come into my consideration, and I like to overthink them as much as possible.
Yeah. Like every comic. Yeah.
Like every comic.
So one of the things that I wanted to talk about, because a lot of comics do an album pretty much so that they can get on Sirius, on one or three of the channels like you're on. And that's because that's really the only way you're going to get paid, because Spotify is not going to pay you. Pandora's not going to pay you much. It's just nickels and dimes, whereas Sirius, you can actually make a little bit of bank doing that. What's the process to get your comedy on there? Is it like a submission, just like for a festival, or what do you do to get on there?
It can be connections with people that are serious, or in my case, I did my record through On Tour Records, and I know Ross Duncliffe, who runs On Tour, has a good relationship with Sirius XM, and he has a lot of his artists get picked up. Not all of them get picked up, but some of them get picked up, some of them. So I knew that he had these relationships there, and was hopeful that I might get on one channel, let alone three. When he sent me that message, it was a very happy day for me. I agree with that. And we're also at the point where my first thing about an album was just to sell after shows and to have the material that I would feel bad about doing the exact same thing that's on that. So I'm motivating myself that I have to move on from a lot of this material at the same time too, which might have been my fear of not doing an album sooner, because I was right at the point where maybe I didn't feel like I had quite enough material to headline, or to not use some of my best bits in a set. But so there's the motivation to move on, write more and create more. And then mostly was to sell albums after the show, which I don't have any hard copies. I haven't even ordered digital download cards because I'm just not working that much.
Yeah.
And there's not that many shows but I really need to follow up on that. And I even might need to, even though I've gotten different advice from different club owners, club managers, people that work around the business, see comedians come in and hear comedians complain about having CDs and having a closet full of these things, and no one ever buys them because everybody wants a digital download card or something.
Yeah.
But I think people also want to, when you're at a comedy show, it's like why they'll buy a t-shirt or whatever afterwards. They just want to tip you. They want to maybe get a picture with you instead of an autograph on your CD, but maybe they want to get an autograph on a hard copy of something, maybe an album, maybe a vinyl thing that would be more of a collector's thing. But I think that was my main motivation before, was to just have an album, have something I'm proud of, have something that I could sell after shows. I used to sell my buddy Mike Cody's CD after my show, and I'd be like, "Hey, if you wanna buy a CD, I got one after the show. It's not me."
Yeah.
First, I'd say nothing you heard tonight's on here because it's not me.
Yeah.
This is my buddy's album. It's just really good, and I think you should check him out. He's from Cincinnati, also.
Yeah.
And that did not go over all the time, but it did. It was quite funny and quite fun to do for a little bit.
You hit on something really cool that I would like to see more comics do, and that's the vinyl, because vinyl's huge now, and small runs are it's a lot more available than it used to be. Dan Cummins used a friend of mine. He's got a record company down in Indy, Romanus Records. He used him to do his last album and put it out that way, and they sold out a couple times. They did a couple different runs and sold out a couple times, but he does really cool stuff with it. He'll put liquid in it. He's got vinyl with remote control lights and stuff like that. He does really neat stuff with it, but that creates a memory, and that's also what a CD does, because you're looking at it, and even if you never take the wrapping off and you only listen on Spotify, you've got it and you bought it, and it always reminds you, oh yeah, Gabe was funny. So that keeps a memory in your mind, and an LP really even does more.
The funny part, when you were asking me about favorite albums or specials, I was thinking of a few of buddies of mine that gave me their album, and I really like Brett Erickson's merch is one that comes to mind. But then I also I know his album. I've worked with him several times. I know all the jokes in there, but it's still wrapped in plastic, and I haven't even opened it. So then I was thinking, can you honestly say that's your favorite, that it's still, but I just want the physical copy. I just want to have that and have a collection of different people. Now I'm thinking of all those. I just got to go get them, and I'll flip through them. Here's some of my favorites.
Yeah, I do, and I do that with both music and comedy, because I've got vinyl all over here, and I don't have a turntable, and I'm not going to get one because my hearing is so fucked up that I don't hear the nuances anymore. So why bother? But if I see neat vinyl, I'm still going to get it. So just because I want to have it. But yeah, it's neat and it's different. I'm trying to think of the aesthetic of giving somebody a business card size card for a download versus a physical CD. And every time I've walked away with a physical CD, I feel obligated to follow that comic more. I don't know why. It's just something that's underlying, I guess. It's not even spoken, but yeah, it's weird. I'm 41, so I'm in the age group of CDs weren't even, I was around before CDs with tapes and stuff. So cassette tapes and records. But so my age group, I don't really, even though I know I can just download it, I don't even need a digital download card. I can just go get it with your name on my phone and go into iTunes and get it. Yeah. But there's still something that is about that physical copy that is, I think I'm gonna change my mind on that. I told someone, I was like, I would pay, I know it costs a little bit more money, but I would pay probably $1,000 just to have one of my CDs to be oh, I got it, I made it. Yep. Thanks for this. I've got 900 other ones. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Thinking about, as we're wrapping up here, thinking about your entire career, what would you say is the best and worst advice you ever got?
Ooh, best and worst advice. I probably won't. The worst advice won't come to me. It'll come to me later tonight, and I'll be like, "Oh, that was it." I'll probably block that stuff out a lot of times. But I've had people, just like you said, you had some people say, "You got to be dirtier, or you got to say fuck more," or something. I've had some people give me some advice like that. You got to do it like this or something, and I just would be like, ugh. And then I think a lot of people tell you where to go and what to do. You got to move here, and then you move there, and then you move this. And I moved to Cincinnati to go against the moving to New York or LA. I was like, I want to move somewhere else, but I just I don't want to move to the place where every other comic is moving, basically. And I've not gotten on TV, so I've been, I didn't get that late night spot or whatever, but there's some things that will, but it doesn't mean that I'm not doing comedy more or less than someone that's living in New York, Chicago, Atlanta, those bigger market cities, or LA. So I think the moving part and where I should move and what I should, I'd say that's probably some of the best or worst advice that I've gotten. People tell you like what's best for your career, but I think you listen to what everybody has to say. Obviously they're saying that for a reason. Just like I said, when I was like, I'm not on late night. That's in my mind. I'm like, I'm not on there because I didn't move. And I'm like, is that really why? What if because I moved there and they're like, oh yeah, come on right away. You know, that's not necessarily how it works, but I think there is, and I think stand-up's changing with the way the pandemic has affected things. And it was like this before, where there's less feature act comedians or opening comedians traveling around the country, whereas every scene has their own openers. So basically a lot of people, they either open for somebody, like there's a headliner that brings them along, or they're just in their local area scene, and they're the person that's called when needs an open. Some of those people that you named at the beginning, I was like, just person coming through town and they're looking for an opener. And sometimes it's a club manager recommending me. Sometimes it's a radio personality recommending someone from the area that knows that I can follow or that I could come through in that sort of situation, doing 10 to 15 to open up. But I think I got a really good one was I got asked to open for Tracy Morgan here in Cincinnati, and it was my sister's wedding. And I was like on my way to St. Louis to go to my sister's wedding. And I like got this phone call, like Tracy Morgan needs an opener. I recommended you. And I remember just thinking, oh man, now I got to call my sister and tell her I can't come to her wedding. So instead I went to my sister's wedding and I just told everybody that story to make myself feel like, oh, I sacrificed a lot for this.
Yeah. This is why your gift is small.
This is a good way to name drop and humble brag at the same time.
Yeah. That's great. It's funny. I talk to a lot of comics who have relocated to one of the coasts, and their advice is not to relocate to the coast because they're doing all their work in the Midwest or, the North or the South. So they're paying for travel. They're paying $1,500 for a studio apartment, and they've got nothing to show for it, and they can't get on stage in LA or New York to save their life. It's one of those things. It's a catch-22. You're not gonna get the big jobs there, but you're also not gonna work anywhere but Midwest anyway, because that's where most of the pay is right now.
Yeah, and that's been building or been the norm in the last few years. I think everything's changing with the pandemic, and honestly, it might be where some people, like I heard someone was moving to New York, and I was like, right now, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, maybe right now is. Maybe that is. No one else is. So it might be a good time for that stuff. So
great. So Gabe, where can people find you online if they want to find your stuff?
Online, you can go to my website. It should link to all my social media on there. We'll have a link to my album as well. Gabe Kea on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat. You can find me on Instagram as Abe Lincoln T-shirt, but I think Gabe Kea will take you to Abe Lincoln T-shirt as well. That's the only one where I have a weird screen name because I probably made that before I realized I was like, I should probably do the same thing on every one.
Yeah.
That's probably the best way to do it for marketing if I have a unique name. But yeah, Gabe Kea, Google it. I used to have a business card that was just Google and my name.
Yeah.
It was like simplest thing. And ended up having my car broken into, and someone stole 1,000 of those out of my car. And I was like, I'm not buying another 1,000.
Wow, yeah. And what are they going to do with them?
Oh man, that person was so pissed. They saw this FedEx box that looked like it was worth some money, and then they opened it up, and they looked at that dumb little business card, and that still brings me joy. To know how pissed off they were.
Oh, that's nuts. Thanks so much for being on the show. This was a good chat, and I wish you the best of luck because I just really enjoyed your album, and it made me go out and watch all your YouTube videos and stuff. So it was really good.
Oh, great. Thanks. The album's better than the YouTube videos, everybody. The YouTube videos are like the raw versions of those jokes, or sometimes different jokes. But no, I really appreciate you having me on, Scott.
Yeah.
And, good to meet you. Good to hang out for a little bit and talk comedy. Love doing it.
Thank you.
And,
well, yeah, that was a lot of fun. Thanks a lot.
It's a new year, and with T-Mobile, it's not about how far apart we are. It's about how close we can be. So we're bringing out our best deal. Right now, get the iPhone 12 on us on every single plan with eligible iPhone trade-in.
So I can FaceTime with my sister in Savannah.
That's right, the iPhone 12 on us on every plan. All on America's 5G leader in coverage. T-Mobile.
With 24 monthly bill credits and a new line plus tax. If you cancel, credit stop and balance on required finance agreement may be due. Contact us for well-qualified buyers. Qualifying consumer plan required. See coverage and offer details at T-Mobile.com.
It's a new year, and with T-Mobile, it's not about how far apart we are. It's about how close we can be. So we're bringing out our best deal. Right now, get the iPhone 12 on us on every single plan with eligible iPhone trade-in.
So I can FaceTime with my sister in Savannah.
That's right, the iPhone 12 on us on every plan. All on America's 5G leader in coverage. T-Mobile.
With 24 monthly bill credits and a new line plus tax. If you cancel, credit stop and balance on required finance agreement may be due. Contact us for well-qualified buyers. Qualifying consumer plan required. See coverage and offer details at T-Mobile.com.